When I first saw her, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. The way she tilted her head, the sharp arch of her brow, even the way she smiled. It was my father, only she was a woman. It happened on a Saturday morning at a charity brunch my husband, Daniel, had dragged me to. He said his best friend, Michael, was hosting it for his company's foundation. I wasn't in the mood. I just lost my father 2 months earlier, and the world still felt like it was missing a heartbeat. But Daniel insisted, gently, "It'll be good for you, Claire. Just a change of scenery." The event was held at a small hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glimmered over white tablecloths, the hum of polite conversation filling the air. I remember clutching a cup of coffee so tightly that my hands trembled. And then I saw her. Across the room, a woman in a soft blue dress was laughing. That deep, throaty laugh that carried warmth. My breath caught in my chest. I blinked once, twice, but the image didn't fade. Her nose, her jawline, even the small scar near her eyebrow, everything was him. I felt my knees weaken. My father, Henry, had been gone for only 60 days, buried under a gray sky and tulips my mother had chosen because he loved their stubbornness. Seeing his face again, mirrored on a stranger, felt like being pulled between life and death. "Claire, you okay?" Daniel's hand brushed my arm. I pointed across the room. "Who's that woman?" Daniel followed my gaze. "Oh, that's Elaine, Michael's wife." "Elaine," I whispered, tasting the name. Something inside me stirred, an ache, but also a question. Has she been to our house before? Daniel frowned. "No, why?" "Because—" I trailed off, eyes locked on her as she turned slightly, revealing the familiar slope of her shoulders. "She looks exactly like my father." Daniel chuckled softly, thinking I was being dramatic. Maybe a coincidence? People look alike sometimes. But no, I knew faces. I'd studied my father's features every morning for years when I brushed my hair in the mirror, because I had his eyes, and she had them too. That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel lay beside me, snoring softly, while my mind replayed every detail. Her gestures, her laugh, the faint tremor in her hand when she lifted her wine glass. I searched for her name online, Elaine Brooks. Her husband, Michael Brooks, ran a software firm with Daniel. They'd known each other for nearly 15 years, since college. I found pictures of Elaine on company event pages, smiling at ribbon cuttings, posing beside Michael, radiant in every frame. And in every single one, I saw my father's face staring back. I clicked through until I found one photo from 10 years ago. She looked younger then, her hair darker, but that same dimple near her left cheekbone. My father had one too, a dimple that only appeared when he was truly happy. That night, I whispered into the darkness, "Who are you, Elaine?" A week later, I visited my mother. She was sitting on the porch, knitting a sweater she'd never finish. Grief had made her slower, quieter. We spoke of ordinary things, the neighbor's dog, the changing leaves, until I couldn't hold it anymore. "Mom," I said carefully, "did Dad have any siblings he never told us about?" She stopped knitting mid-stitch. Her hands froze. "No, he was an only child. You know that." "I know, but—" I hesitated. "I met someone. She looks exactly like him. Like, exactly." Her eyes darted away, the yarn trembling in her hand. "Coincidences happen, Claire." But her voice betrayed her. It wasn't disbelief, it was fear. Later that evening, as I was leaving, she stopped me at the door. Her voice was softer, fragile. "There are things, Claire, things your father wanted to keep buried." I turned, my pulse racing. "What things?" She shook her head. "You should let the past rest. He loved you. That's all that matters." But it wasn't enough. Love doesn't erase secrets. The following week, Michael and Elaine invited us to dinner. Daniel was thrilled. He and Michael had been spending more time together, working on a joint project. I didn't tell him what I suspected. I didn't even tell myself out loud. But something in me needed to see her again. The dinner was at their home. A warm, modern house with soft jazz playing in the background. Elaine greeted us at the door, her perfume faintly floral, her smile kind. Up close, the resemblance was unbearable. I could see the faint freckle under her chin, the same spot my father had. "You must be Claire," she said warmly, clasping my hands. "I've heard so much about you." Her palms were warm and trembling. As we sat down to eat, I studied her every movement. The way she held her fork, the tilt of her head when she listened, every small detail screamed Henry. At one point, she noticed my gaze and smiled. "Is something wrong, dear?" I forced a polite laugh. "No, not at all. You just remind me of someone." "Oh," she said softly. "Someone close?" "My father," I said. "He passed recently." Her smile faltered. Only for a second, but I saw it. The flicker of recognition or guilt in her eyes. She looked down quickly, taking a sip of water. "I'm sorry to hear that," she murmured. Michael, oblivious, raised a toast to new beginnings and old friends. But I couldn't lift my glass because across the table, Elaine's hands were shaking. That night, when Daniel and I got home, he was cheerful, humming as he loosened his tie. "They're great people, huh? Elaine's so down to earth." "Yeah," I murmured. "Down to earth." He looked at me, confused. "What's that tone?" I turned to face him. "Daniel, if I find out something strange about her, would you want to know?" He shrugged, distracted. "You and your instincts again. Try to relax, okay?" But my instincts had never been wrong. And this time, they whispered that I was standing on the edge of something that would change everything. My family, my marriage, and everything I thought I knew about my father. The next few days felt like living inside a quiet storm. Everything on the surface looked calm. Work, errands, dinners with Daniel, but underneath, I was restless. I kept replaying that dinner at Michael and Elaine's home. Every gesture, every look she gave me. It wasn't just resemblance anymore. It was familiarity. She knew something. One night, while Daniel showered, I went to his desk to grab a pen. That's when I saw the invitation card, embossed in gold, the same one from the charity brunch where I'd first seen her. But something else was tucked underneath it, a photograph. It was an old one, slightly faded, showing 4 people, Daniel, Michael, a woman who looked younger but unmistakably Elaine, and my father. My heart stuttered. They were standing close, smiling, arms around each other, like old friends. But that couldn't be. My father had never mentioned Michael, and certainly not Elaine. I traced his smile with my finger, remembering his voice. He used to say, "People are like photographs, Claire. Sometimes what you see isn't the whole picture." Now those words came back to haunt. That night, I couldn't pretend anymore. "Daniel," I said quietly, holding the photo, "why didn't you tell me my father knew Michael and Elaine?" He looked up from his laptop, surprised. "What?" "He didn't." I handed him the photo, then explained this. He squinted. "Oh, that. Yeah, Michael showed it to me once. Said it was from a business event years ago. I guess your dad must have been there, maybe through work. But my father wasn't in business. He was a retired high school literature teacher, the man who quoted Hemingway and mowed the lawn every Sunday morning. He hated corporate events. Where was this taken?" I asked. "I don't know. Some conference, maybe. Why does it matter?" I studied his face. He wasn't lying. Daniel was terrible at hiding things, which meant only one thing. Michael and Elaine had kept this secret from him, too. The next morning, I drove to my father's old study. My mother hadn't touched a thing since the funeral. The scent of his cologne still lingered, sandalwood and something faintly citrus. I sat at his desk, running my hand over the worn leather surface. There were boxes of old files, photographs, letters. I went through them slowly, methodically, the way he taught me to solve problems as a child. And then, in a small envelope marked private, I found it. A black and white photograph of 2 infants wrapped in the same hospital blanket. On the back, in my father's handwriting, Henry and Elaine, 1962. I dropped the picture, my pulse hammering in my ears. It couldn't be. But it was. My father hadn't just known her. She was his twin. The air felt thinner as I stood up, gripping the edge of the desk to steady myself. All these years,
He told me he was an only child. Why would he lie about that? I drove home in silence, the photo sitting on the passenger seat like a ghost. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Daniel was outside, talking on the phone. His voice was low, tense. When he saw me, he quickly hung up. Who was that? I asked. He hesitated. Michael. He's been acting weird lately. Said Elaine's not feeling well. I bit my tongue, choosing not to tell him what I'd discovered yet. I needed to be sure, to look Elaine in the eye one more time and hear the truth from her lips. 2 days later, I got my chance. Elaine calls me. Claire, hi. This is a bit sudden, but would you like to join me for coffee tomorrow? There's something I'd like to talk to you about. Her tone was calm, almost practiced, but I could sense something beneath it. Guilt, maybe, or fear. I agreed, even though my hands shook when I hung up. The next morning, I arrived early at the cafe. The place smelled of roasted beans and rain, a comforting scent I clung to as I waited. When she walked in, every head turned. She had that kind of presence, quiet but commanding. She smiled softly when she saw me. Thank you for coming. Of course, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. What did you want to talk about? She hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her cup. I heard you've been asking questions about me, straight to the point. I leaned back slightly. Should I not? It depends on what you're hoping to find, she said. Her eyes, my father's eyes, studied me. Some things are better left in the past. I slid the photograph across the table, the one of the two babies. Her hand froze. I said quietly, tell me the truth, Elaine. Who are you? She stared at the photo for a long moment. Then she sighed, a sound so full of exhaustion it made my chest ache. She whispered, I was hoping Henry would have told you someday, but I suppose he never found the courage. My breath caught. So it's true. She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. We were twins, separated at birth. Our mother was young, poor, terrified. We were adopted by different families. I found him when we were 30. We promised to stay in touch, but her voice broke. He asked me to stay away from your family. He didn't want your mother to know. I sat there, numb. Why? Because, she said softly, your mother hated secrets, and your father had too many of them already. Her words sink into me like stones. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Why now? Why lie? Why keep her hidden? But before I could, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed, pale, alarmed. I have to go, she said quickly, standing up. Please, Claire, don't tell anyone about this yet. Elaine, but she was already gone. That night, I told Daniel everything. He listened in stunned silence, running a hand through his hair. This is insane, he muttered. Your dad had a twin? And she's married to Michael? Yes. And she told me he didn't want Mom to know. Daniel exhaled. Michael must have known. There's no way he married her without realizing she was your father's sister. I looked at him, realization dawning. You're right. He knew, which means, I swallowed, he's been hiding it too. But what neither of us knew, what I had learned just days later, was that Michael's secret went even deeper. And when the truth came out, it would tear two families apart. The morning after my talk with Elaine, I woke with a strange ache behind my ribs, the kind that comes when you slept too long on a truth you didn't want to hold. I thought about calling her again, but she hadn't answered my last few texts. Daniel said maybe I should give her time, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unraveling quietly behind the scenes. That weekend, Michael invited us over for dinner again. Just something casual, he said on the phone. Elaine's been wanting to make it up to you, said your last conversation ended a bit abruptly. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I needed answers. And this time, I wasn't going to let her slip away. Their house looked the same as before. Neat, warm, filled with that faint scent of vanilla candles. Elaine greeted us at the door, her smile a little tighter than usual. Claire, Daniel, come in. Dinner's almost ready. We sat at the table, the men chatting about work while Elaine and I exchanged small talk. She looked pale, her hands trembling slightly when she poured the wine. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but the timing wasn't right. Then, halfway through dinner,
Daniel excused himself to take a call. Michael followed him into the living room. Elaine waited until they were out of earshot before leaning forward. Her voice was low, trembling. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you. Something I didn't say at the cafe." My heart picked up. "What is it?" She looked down at her hands. "Michael knows. He's always known who I am. But that's not all." Her voice faltered. "He also knew your father." I frowned. "Yes. From the photo." "No." She shook her head. "Before that. Long before you ever met Daniel. Your father helped Michael with something years ago. Something illegal." I froze. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated, glancing toward the living room. "When Henry was alive, he loaned Michael a large sum of money to cover a failed investment. Your father was generous, maybe too generous. But when he asked for repayment, Michael refused. They argued, and eventually, Henry cut ties." My breath caught. "That can't be right. My father would never." "He did, Claire. And after Henry's death, Michael found me, said we shared the same last name once. That's how we started talking. I didn't realize his connection to Daniel until later. By then," she sighed, tears forming. "By then it was too late. I loved him. It was too much to process. My father, money, lies, betrayal tangled between two families. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because," she said softly, "Michael found those old letters your father wrote me. He's been using them. He says if I ever talk, he'll tell Daniel that Henry stole money from him." I stared at her, disbelief turning to anger. "That's blackmail." She nodded slowly. "And it's getting worse. He's been threatening to expose the truth, not to protect himself, but to destroy your father's name." At that moment, the men came back into the room. Daniel looked uneasy, while Michael wore that same easy smile that always felt too polished. "Everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," Michael said, pouring himself more wine. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." Elaine's eyes darted toward me, silently pleading. I couldn't eat another bite. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. When Daniel and I finally got in the car to leave, I didn't say a word. I just stared out the window, thinking about my father's quiet dignity, about how carefully he'd lived his life, and how easily someone could tarnish it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel lay beside me, breathing evenly, unaware of the storm building just inches away. I got up, went to the kitchen, and pulled out my phone. If what Elaine said was true, there had to be proof. Letters, records, something. And if Michael had them, I needed to see for myself. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went back to their house the next morning, alone. Elaine wasn't home. Michael answered the door, surprised but polite. "Claire, didn't expect to see you. Everything all right?" "I just wanted to talk," I said evenly, "about my father." He froze for a fraction of a second, subtle, but I caught it. "Ah, Henry. Great man. Shame we didn't know each other better. Funny," I said, stepping inside. "Elaine mentioned you two had some unfinished business." His smile tightened. "She talks too much sometimes." In my car, I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, my father's handwriting neat and steady. "Elaine, if you ever read this, know that I forgave you long ago. I only wished you told me the truth, not about the money, but about the child." I froze. "The child?" My eyes raced to the next lines. He deserved to know, even if the world wouldn't understand. That was all. No names, no explanation, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. A child. Elaine had a child, and somehow my father was involved. But the question that tore through me was even worse. Whose child was it? I don't remember driving home. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, the letter resting on the passenger seat like something alive, dangerous. Breathing, a child. My father's words looped endlessly in my head. If Elaine had been pregnant, if that child had survived, then I had a sibling somewhere. The thought was too big, too heavy to hold. When I got home, Daniel was in the kitchen, making coffee. "Hey," he said, glancing up. Where were you this morning? You didn't say anything before leaving. I hesitated, still catching my breath. I went to see Michael. He frowned. Why? I needed to understand something about my father, about Elaine. I set the letter on the counter, the faint smell of old paper filling the room. Daniel's eyes dropped to it. What's that? Proof, I said softly, that my father and Elaine shared more than just blood, that she had a child, his child. He stared at me, speechless. What are you saying, Claire? I sank into the chair, my voice shaking. I'm saying that my father, or maybe someone he protected, had a secret. And Michael knew. He's been holding it over Elaine's head all this time. Daniel rubbed his face, silent. Then he whispered, "You're sure about this?" That evening, I called Elaine. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Finally, I drove to her house, praying she'd be home. Her car was in the driveway. I knocked, but she didn't open. I could hear faint movement inside, like footsteps pacing. When the door finally opened, she looked exhausted. Eyes red, face pale. "Claire," she whispered, "you shouldn't be here." "I found the letter," I said simply, "from Henry." Her hand went to her mouth. "Oh, no, I need to know. The child. What happened?" She stepped back, letting me in. The living room was dim, blinds half closed, the scent of lavender faint in the air. She sat on the couch, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. "It was a long time ago," she began quietly. "Before I met Michael, I was 19, lost, angry. Henry found me, helped me get on my feet. We became close, too close." Her voice broke. "When I found out I was pregnant, he panicked, said it would ruin everything. He arranged for me to leave town, to have the baby quietly. He promised he'd take care of it all." I listened in stunned silence. But when the baby was born, I couldn't do it. I couldn't give him away. Henry said he'd help, but someone found out, someone from his past. They threatened to expose him. So I did the only thing I could. She looked up at me, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I told everyone the baby died." My breath hitched. "But he didn't." She shook her head slowly. "No, he didn't." I sat in silence, the room spinning. "Then where is he now?" Elaine swallowed hard. "You've already met him." I froze. "What?" Her voice trembled. "His name is Michael." The words didn't register at first. They just hung there, suspended, impossible. I stared at her, unable to speak. "You mean your husband?" "Yes," she said, breaking into sobs. "He's Henry's son. My son. I never told him. I couldn't. By the time he found out, he was already angry. Said I'd ruined his life with lies. He started resenting your father, blaming him for everything." I sat there, speechless. The world tilted beneath me. Michael, my husband's best friend, the man who'd spent years around our family, was my half-brother. I felt sick, betrayed, and somehow guilty for a secret I hadn't even known. "How long have you known Daniel?" I asked finally. "Since before you were married," she said weakly. "Michael introduced us. He thought you were kind, good for him. He said Daniel needed someone strong." I pressed my palms together, trying to steady my breathing. "So all this time he knew who I was?" She nodded. "I think he suspected. He once said you reminded him of someone, your father, perhaps. But he never said it outright. He liked the control, I think." I stood slowly, my body shaking. "Elaine, it's too much." "I know," she whispered, "but you needed to hear it from me, not him." That night, I couldn't look at Daniel the same way. Not because of what he'd done, but because of what surrounded him. We were caught in a web spun long before us by people who had hidden too much for too long. I told him everything. He listened silently, then said, "So Michael's your half-brother. My best friend is your father's son." "Yes," I whispered. Daniel leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "That explains a lot." "What do you mean?" "The way he's always watched you, protected you in strange ways, and then turned cold out of nowhere. He probably found out the truth and didn't know how to handle it. The realization made me feel dizzy. We need to confront him. Daniel shook his head. Not yet. Let's think this through. He's unpredictable. If he feels cornered, he might do something stupid. But I wasn't thinking rationally anymore. I wanted the truth out, all of it. I was done living under someone else's shadow. The next day, I went back to Michael's house, alone again. He opened the door, expression unreadable. Claire, twice in 2 days. You must really like my cooking. Cut the games, I said coldly. I know everything. His jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Everything? That you're my father's son, that Elaine lied, that you've been holding this secret over her for years. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped aside, motioning me in. Then you might as well come in, sister. The word hit like a slap. I stepped inside, my pulse hammering. Why didn't you tell me? He laughed bitterly. Because you had the life I was supposed to have. The father, the name, the comfort. I got secrets, shame, and a mother who lied to me for decades. That wasn't my fault, I said quietly. Maybe not, he said, eyes narrowing. But it's funny how fate works. You ended up right where I could see you. Perfect, untouched, everything he wanted. I couldn't resist tearing that image apart. I felt my stomach twist. So that's what this was about? Revenge? He smirked. No, Claire. Closure. I didn't reply. I just stared at him, realizing that beneath his anger was a lifetime of pain, the kind that turns love into poison. And still, a part of me pitied him, but pity wasn't enough anymore. You're done hurting people. Elaine, Daniel, me. It ends now. He looked at me for a long time. Then something softened in his face. Maybe it should. When I left, the sky had turned gray, a thin drizzle falling. The air smelled like rain and iron, sharp, cleansing, and heavy with endings. 2 days later, the truth began to unravel on its own, as if secrets, once exposed to daylight, refused to stay hidden again. Elaine called me that morning, her voice trembling. Claire, he told them. Who? I asked, sitting up in bed. Michael, he told his colleagues, our friends, everyone, about the affair, about your father, about the child. Her sobs broke through the line. He said if he had to live with shame, so would everyone else. I closed my eyes. Oh, Elaine. By afternoon, it was everywhere. Whispers spread across the neighborhood like wildfire. Through dinner tables, coffee shops, even the office where Daniel worked. The story had the perfect recipe for gossip. Betrayal, family scandal, hidden bloodlines. Daniel came home that evening looking weary. They know Claire. My coworkers. They're talking. I felt a wave of guilt. I didn't want this. He sat beside me, rubbing my hand gently. I know, but sometimes the truth doesn't ask for permission. A few days later, Elaine asked if I'd accompany her to a small family gathering. Not to defend herself, she said, but to face the music. When we arrived, the air in the room was thick with tension. Michael stood near the window, staring out, his face expressionless. Around him were a few relatives, people who had once adored Elaine, now whispering behind cups of tea. Elaine's sister, Margaret, broke the silence first. Elaine, how could you? With your own brother's husband? Elaine looked down. He wasn't my brother then. I didn't know Henry had another child, let alone Margaret scoffed. You always have excuses. That's when I stepped forward. Enough. Every eye turned to me. My father made his mistakes. He hurt both of them. But Elaine didn't deserve to live a lifetime under his shadow. None of us did. The room went quiet. Elaine looked at me with wet eyes. Michael turned around slowly. It's too late for sympathy, Claire. Maybe, but it's not too late for peace. He laughed, but it wasn't cruel this time. It sounded tired. Peace? After what I did? You told the truth, I said softly. That's something? He shook his head. No, I destroyed reputations, families, all because I wanted someone else to feel what I felt. I stepped closer. Then maybe now you understand. That pain doesn't heal by passing it around. For the first time since I'd met him, Michael looked small.
Not physically, but spiritually. The bitterness seemed to fade from his face, replaced by something almost like regret. He walked toward Elaine, his mother, and stopped a few feet away. I hated you, he said quietly, for lying, for protecting him. But now I see you were just scared. Elaine reached out, her hand shaking. I was, sweetheart, every day. He didn't take her hand, but he didn't walk away either. And in that fragile silence between them, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faint beginning of it. A week later, Michael resigned from his company and left town. He sent me a short message before leaving. Maybe someday we can start again. Not as enemies, as family. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed time to let the meaning of that word, family, settle in again. It had become heavier, but also clearer. The gossip faded eventually, as gossip always does, but the consequences stayed, lingering in looks and silence and small moments of awkwardness during family gatherings. Still, something good came out of it too. Daniel and I grew closer, maybe because the chaos forced us to stand together instead of apart. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he said quietly, your father's mistakes don't define you. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but they taught me something important. What's that? That secrets don't protect us. They only bury us alive. He nodded, squeezing my hand. Then let's promise no more secrets. I turned to him, really looking at him, his tired eyes, his familiar smile, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. No more, I said. A month later, I visited my father's grave again. The grass had grown thick around the headstone, and the autumn wind carried that bittersweet scent of fallen leaves and rain. I placed a single white lily beside the stone. I found him, I whispered. Your son. The wind picked up, rustling the trees. For a moment, it felt like an answer. I don't hate you, I said softly. I just wished you'd trusted us with the truth. I stayed there for a long while, thinking of everything that happened, the lies, the revelations, the pain. But beneath all that was something deeper, quieter, understanding. Because love, even when broken, leaves behind something, a lesson, a trace of what once was. That night, Elaine called again. Michael sent me a letter, she said. He's in another city, working at a small firm. He says he's trying to make things right. That's good, I said. He deserves a chance. So do we, she added softly. Maybe we can all start over someday. I smiled faintly. Maybe we already have. When I hung up, I stood by the window for a long time, watching the rain streak down the glass. The past had torn through our lives like a storm, but it had also cleared the air, revealing truths we were long overdue to face. And as the thunder rolled in the distance, I whispered to myself, sometimes to heal a wound, you have to let it bleed first. Months passed before I realized how much lighter the air around me had become. Not because everything was fixed, far from it, but because I had stopped trying to carry every broken piece of the past alone. It was early spring when I visited Elaine again. She had moved into a smaller house on the edge of town, a quiet, sunlit place with white curtains and a garden she tended with her own hands. When she opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, yes, but softer somehow, like a woman learning how to breathe again. Claire! She smiled, opening her arms. I was hoping you'd come. The smell of lavender drifted through the air as I stepped inside. How are you doing? She shrugged gently. Some days are easier than others, but I sleep better now. And I've started painting again. Painting? She nodded, motioning toward a small easel near the window. On it was a canvas, a soft, unfinished landscape. A lone tree stood in the middle of a wide, quiet field. It's not much, she said, but it feels good to make something again. I smiled. It's beautiful, Elaine. She looked at me for a long moment. You remind me of him sometimes. Your father, the way you see people, even when they're difficult to love. I swallowed the ache in my throat. He made his choices, but so did we. And maybe that's what matters now. She nodded slowly, her eyes misting. You're right, my dear. We all carry our own share of guilt and grace. That night, as I drove home, I stopped by the old cafe where Daniel and I had our first date. He was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee. I smiled as I walked in, that same small smile that had survived every storm. "Hey," he said softly as I sat down. "You look peaceful." "I feel it," I admitted, for the first time in a long while. He reached for my hand. "You know, when everything happened with your father, with Michael, I thought we wouldn't survive it." "I did too," I whispered, "but maybe we needed to break to understand what we were really made of." He squeezed my hand gently. "And what's that?" "Resilience. And love that doesn't vanish just because the world shakes." He smiled, eyes soft. "I like that." Over the following weeks, I began to rebuild quietly. I returned to my work, the same small publishing office where stories had always found me, even when my own felt too heavy to tell. And one afternoon, as I edited a manuscript about forgiveness and family, I realized that maybe that was what my life had become. A story about learning to forgive what you can't forget. Every now and then, I received letters from Michael. They weren't long, a few lines, written in careful, uncertain handwriting. I've started therapy. I'm teaching kids at a local community center. I don't expect anything, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. Each letter ended with the same phrase, "Thank you for not hating me." And every time I read those words, I felt the same quiet ache, the ache of understanding that sometimes forgiveness isn't an event. It's a decision you make again and again until one day it becomes peace. One Sunday, Daniel and I visited the lake where my father used to take me fishing as a little girl. The sky was soft and golden, the kind of light that makes everything seem gentler than it really is. "I brought something," I told Daniel, pulling a small wooden box from my bag. Inside were 2 old photographs, one of my father and me when I was 10, and another of Elaine and her twin brother, long before I was born. "I want to let them go," I said quietly. He nodded, and together we walked to the edge of the dock. I set the photos gently on the water. They floated for a moment, catching the light before the ripples took them away. As I watched them drift out of sight, I whispered, "For all the secrets that kept us apart, may the truth finally bring us peace." The wind lifted slightly, cool and kind, and I swear, for a moment, I felt my father's voice in that breeze. Not words, but forgiveness. Not explanation, but release. Back home, I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair as the evening light poured through the window. I looked at my reflection, at the lines beneath my eyes, the quiet calm in my expression, and realized something simple but profound. Healing doesn't erase what happened. It just teaches you to live beautifully despite it. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Family isn't about blood. It's about the people who choose to stay when the truth finally comes out." And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is face the truth and love what's left. A few days later, a small package arrived at my door. Inside was a painting, the one Elaine had been working on when I visited her, but this time it was finished. The lone tree now stood tall, surrounded by soft blue skies and sunlight breaking through the clouds. On the back of the canvas, she'd written, "To Claire, for teaching me that even the truth, when faced with courage, can be a kind of grace." I smiled through tears. The painting now hangs in my living room, a reminder that even from broken roots, something beautiful can still grow. That night, I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the rain fall again, the same sound that had followed me through every chapter of my life. But this time, it didn't sound lonely. It sounded alive, like a promise that no matter how many secrets or scars we carry, love, quiet, imperfect love, will always find its way back to the surface. You know, when I look back now, I realize that truth isn't always gentle. Sometimes it arrives like a storm, tearing through everything you thought you knew. But if you're patient enough to stand in the rain, it washes you clean. For a long time, I thought my family's secrets had ruined me. But now I see they shaped me into someone stronger, quieter, and a little wiser. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means choosing not to let it define who you become. And love
The real kind isn't about perfection. It's about grace, the kind you give, even when it's hard. So if you ever find yourself standing in the middle of a truth you never asked for, remember this. You can't control who breaks your heart, but you can control how you rise after it's broken. Tell me, my dear, if you discovered a secret that changed everything you knew about your family, would you choose to expose it or to heal it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe for more true stories every day from the heart of Auntie May.